Hello everyone and welcome back. So in today's video we'll continue our project on creating this product shot in Houdini. This is the progress I have so far and probably very close to our final render. So in today's video we're not going to be able to finish, I believe, but we will create the logo, maybe adjust the shape of the bottle, and if we have time we can also create the splash and the water drops. So let's see what we can accomplish. So this is our current progress. We have the bottle and we have created also the displacement for the bottle, but I'm going to change a few things because this design is not really how it looks in real life. So I'm trying to replicate an existing bottle. So we will change a few things first and then we will tackle the logo. So for this, we will need to change in here the triangle first. So let's adjust these. Let's remove this blur and let's have a look in here. Let's adjust these to 0.75 and 0.38 as the height, something like this, and move, and we can keep it like this. And then let's see, I guess this is fine. Next, we will convert it to mono, so we can get rid of this adjust and blur and convert it to mono. And I believe I didn't use any ISO offset. Then we can mirror, we can set a transform and an invert. So we can get rid of these layer properties, invert and transform it. This blur we can keep. Let's see how that looks. So something like this. Maybe we can adjust the initial triangle to cover a bit more the shape. So let's go in here and change the width. So something like this can work. Maybe increase the height. Yeah, something like this will work. So that's fine. Now we will tackle the logo. So for the logo, I'm gonna start with an SDF shape. And this will take some time because we need to do quite a few things. So let's change this to, you can pick your preferred shape. I'm gonna use this squircle and change the blend to 1.5 to have this diamond-like shape and change the uniform scale to 0.8. Now I'm going to dilate it a bit with, or erode it a bit with an SDF adjust. And then I'm going to move it by about minus 0.12. And we can do an SDF combine, or in this case, blend. And we can pick, in this case, subtract. Then finally we can convert it to a mono. So let's do SDF to mono. And instead of using shape, we will use outline, and we will change the width to be about 0.01. So this is our initial shape. Now we can take this secondary shape and convert it also to mono. But in this case, I don't want outline, I want a shape, and I want to change the fill to 0.5. So I can have some variation on the when we colorize it. Then we can do a blend. And we will blend this to max out the values. Then the next step will be, we will do another SDF to mono and keep it as 0.5, and we will blend it, so we can blend again with max to fill in those gaps. So let's change it to max, and we have something like this. The next step, we need to take an extra step in here. So I want to create some text around this outline. So for that we will need to create some custom attributes, some custom UVs. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a null in here so I can import it into subs. So after this stf to mono, I'm gonna create a null and name it out shape. I'm gonna copy and create a sub import. Let's create a grid, and we can pick the same orientation and size of the copy space, so -1 to 1. Let's reverse this and do a UV texture, and we can pick along the z-axis to create the UVs. And now we can do a attribute from map, and we will use our texture in here, our shape, so OP and this. And now we need to subdivide this quite a bit. So in this case, I'm going to subdivide it 5 times, so we get a very sharp shape. And now we can blast if the color is 0. So let's do a blast, and at CD, which is the color, is equal to 0, and make sure we are on points. Now we can delete all the colors and attributes, so just delete everything, and we get this shape. Now the way I did this was by, I want to extract the interior part so I can then sweep it with a ribbon. This might not be the best way, but the way I did it was by using these solve flat edges, so to remove the interior edges. And then I did a fuse, and also a straight skeleton 2D. So lab straight skeleton 2D. Let's see how that works for us. Doesn't create great results by default, so we need to increase this threshold to 0.6 and also this resample to 0.05. So we get something like this. Maybe increase the fuse amount. That's fine. Now we can resample it. Resample 0.1, maybe 0.05, and subdivision. Let's see if that is close to our shape. We lose some sharpness at the edges, at the corners, but let's keep it like this. And now, what else we will do? We can set, we won't need an up attribute, so we can just fuse and create here a group. So we will fuse, because right now the curve is open. There should be a point where is open, so it's right there, as you can see when I fuse it. And now let's see if we have a single curve. We do, and let's do a group range to create the UVs after. So I'm just gonna select one single point, which will be this one. Now we can sweep, and we can do ribbon. And let's see, do we have normals in here? Yeah, we do have normals, so let's just create a new normal. So orient along curve, that's fine. And we can create the up, so we add up to equal to set 0, 0, 1. So along the z, that is fine. Now we will create in here 12 columns and a width of 0.2. So 0.2, that is fine. Now we can group promote that group we created before with the group range. So group 1, I believe. And we will promote it to edges and just keep the edge. Now we can just do a UV flatten. And let's select that group 1. Let's see the UVs. Control 5, spacebar 5, and we also want to rectify and disable manual layout. So this should give us a value along U and V. So that will be useful to orient the text around. Let's create an output, and that should be good for now. So we have this. Now we will create a wrangle to rasterize this. So let's create a wrangle. Or we could potentially rasterize geometry. Let's see if that also gives us what we need. So that we don't need a wrangle right now. And we will need a UV transform. So we can play with the orientation or with the position. And we will just do in here a font. We will create the text. So let's create the text and let's say pure alkaline water. I have no idea what I'm saying, but just something I found. And let's change this to 0.15. Font size 0.14. Is this too small? And I'm gonna change this to Calibri. So yeah, something like this. And now we can do a simple UV sample. And let's change this to texture. Texture, yes. And let's see. Well, we don't see anything because we need to change a few things. So is texture, and we need to start to translate this. So if we translate it, not so much, and translate it also in here, we start to see. And we also need to change the scale. So let's change this to 6 so it can repeat around. And I'm going to reduce this, increase in this case. And I'm also going to play with the translation in here. So not so much. Let's see, 0.35. That should work. Let me see if that aligns. It does. And 0.178. Let's see. So it aligns in here. All right. Now that we have our text there, we can just do another blend. And let's mix these in. And there we have the text. Maybe we can change this text to Calibri bold. Yeah, that will work better. And we can change at the end the resolution so we can make it 2K for better resolution. Let's continue on the next part. So now we will create the main part of the logo, the water drop. So we have a shape for that. If we look in the compound folder, and we will have an egg. And I'm gonna change just a few things. So I'm gonna set the radius to 0.613, the roundness to 0, and translate it down to 0.2, minus 0.2. SDF to mono to convert it to a layer. And from here, we can set the layer properties, so it doesn't repeat. I'm gonna change this to constant. So right now is repeating. I want to change it to constant. And we can potentially blend this over with a max again. So just copy this. And we will also need to transform it, but we'll do that in a bit. So let's get in here and do a transform. And I'm going to scale it to about 0.4. So in the uniform scale, 0.4. And I'm also going to translate it a bit up to 0.1 so we can add some text in here. So not only that, I also want to create some shadow, some fake shadow. So for that, I'm gonna create an OpenCL node, and I have shared this code before, but basically this creates a fake shadow on the, let's see, it will repeat the pixels along a certain direction. And if you want to create this from scratch, you can look into the graffiti tutorial I did a week ago or something like that, and you will find a step-by-step guide. But this is really simple. It just saves me from typing everything again, and we can move on. So let's also remap this. In this case, I'm gonna change the output value to 0.7 something, and I'm going to blend this in. So blend. In this case, we can use we can use this one in here. So let's use in here the destination, and as a mask. No, we will use this as a foreground and the destination as a mask. And now we can blend over this one, which will be right in here. And let's do max. So yeah, that's it. And from here, in this case, I don't think I used that many iterations. I'm gonna change that to 6. So we have just a small shadow. I'm also going to create some shading in the middle. So for that, I'm going to convert again the SDF to mono. So duplicate this, and instead we will use shape, but we will use ISO offset, ISO distance, and change it to 0.4. I believe that's how I did it, but we also need to invert it, of course. Now I'm gonna copy the same in here, so Control Alt Shift drag to have the same transform. And now I'm going to quantize to create the desired look. In this case, I'm just going to pick a few layers, so 5 segments. And I'm also going to remap this. So in this case, I used an output min of 0.27, so it doesn't go to black. And now I can just blend over this. So if we go in here, create a blend, and we move this in here, and we use the same shape that we have in here. So as the background we want this, as foreground we want this, and we want to change this to over, so something like this. And we're almost done. The next step will be to add some text in here. So now let's create the final part, which will be some text, and for that we will need some polar coordinates. So let's create a UV map. Image will be fine. We'll do UV to polar, and we will have the angle and the length, and we can do channel join. We will join the angle and the length as red and green channels and change this to UV. Now we can do a UV transform, as we will need it, and create the text sub-font. Let's change this to Calibri Bold, and we will also change the font size to 1.4, and we can just say something like classic blend, whatever that means. And now we can do a UV sample, and in this case I believe I set it to texture. Yeah, let's connect that, and of course it will look all over the place, so we need to change a bit the transform. Let's start to play with the transform. First of all, I'm gonna translate it to be in here, so 0.25. I'm also going to scale it first. So to scale it, let's see, minus 0.38, and I'm also going to offset it quite a bit, so 0.33. This should do the trick. Now we can possibly increase the resolution, and we have our sample, and now we can just blend this over. So let's drag this in here and blend this. And of course we will set this to maximum. So there we have our logo. Now we can do mono to RGB, and we can play with the presets. I'm not sure which one I used. Which one did I use? Twilight? No, Twilight. Was this one? Let me see. So just remove this red and this one, and maybe introduce some white in here. Did I use this one? Maybe it was another one, so let me change. Twilight shifted. No, was definitely one of these. Let me figure out. So yeah, I believe I used Twilight, but remove these two, move this one in here, and created another blue in here, but maybe lighter. So maybe less saturated. Maybe darker. Yeah, it will never be the same, but we can do something closer. So something like this, and now we can do RGB to RGBA, and we will connect as an alpha the biggest shape, so SDF to mono. That's fine, and let's see if that works. And it should work, right? Yeah, it's creating the transparency. And now we have our logo, so let's create an all alt logo, and we can create a raw image output because we will need this as a file. Connect this in here. Let's change this to logo demo 301.png, and let's render to disk. So that's fine. Now we can come in here in our bottle, make sure we're looking at the z-axis, and we will use my tool, which is the texture projection tool, and I'm gonna place in here somewhere in here, I believe. I'm also going to scale it and change this to be the render logo demo 1. Let's make sure we increase the resolution. Maybe we can increase the scale. Let's see. And we can definitely increase the resolution. Maybe to 4K. It will take a little bit. And we also need to reduce the distance so it doesn't project on the back, and make it transparent so we can import it later to Solaris. So this will be our out texture. By the way, you can grab this tool on my Patreon if you're interested. If you don't have it, you can create a projection in Solaris later. Maybe I can do that also. So we have our logo, we have our bottle. Let's see that bottle. And we also have the cap displacement, I believe. So let's see. Yeah, we also have the cap displacement. And yeah, let's continue on the next part. Alright guys, let's continue on by creating the splash. For that, I'm gonna move into here, create a circle, and place it along the y-axis. Let me see if I change the size. No, I'm just gonna set quite a few subdivisions. And right away I'm gonna create a velocity attribute. I'm gonna set the velocity. So in this case, I will do a similar setup from a tutorial that is available on YouTube. That is pretty good and you should follow. I'm gonna leave the link in the description below. So I'm just gonna set the velocity to be along the normal and with a multiplier. So I'm gonna call it temp. And if we set this to 1.7, and it will look something like this, so just along the normals, which in this case is along y, and we will also move it outwards. So for that, let me grab this and increase this size, and I'm gonna set vector out. It will be equal to v at p minus get bounding box center 0, and we multiply it by a control, and we can just say vector at v plus equals out. And if we increase this, we can control the outer radius. So let's set it to 0.67, let's say. That should be fine. Now we will create some noise to start with. So for that, I'm going to create an attribute to just vector, and it will be on velocity. I'm going to set this to multiply. Gonna change it to length only, and I'm gonna use a noise instead. And for the noise, I'm gonna use alligator, an element size of 0.3 something. I chose in here also the offset, and I'm gonna set the min value to be, I'm gonna set the max value to be 1.22, but I also want to decrease this min value, so I create these unique shapes along y. I'm gonna set this to 0.33 minus 3.3. I might be missing something in here, so let me check. Minus 3.3. Oh, and of course I need to change this to multiply, so we have something like this. Now I want to get rid of this velocity going downwards, so for that I can do a simple wrangle and say that if the velocity y component is bigger than 0, is smaller than 0, we set it to 0. So p at v equals, we can do an if with a select function, and the condition will be v at v dot y is bigger than 0. We will set it to be the same, otherwise we set it to 0.0. So something like this. And now we can transfer this to a point cloud. So we will do an attribute delete and delete everything. So this should delete also the velocity, but for some reason it's still showing. And I will do a thicken, lapse thicken. And let's set this to be 0.05 and in both directions. Now we'll do a points from volume to create our particles, our point cloud. And I'm gonna change this to be 0.0085, so quite a few points. Change the jitter scale and the jitter seed. I chose a value of 3.65. Now we can just do an attribute transfer, so we can have back the velocities. And now the cats are going crazy on the outside. So let's make sure we transfer only the velocity. And I'm gonna change the conditions in here. So in this case, I will increase the sample count and also reduce the distance to 0.15. So something along those lines. And we have everything ready to move this into a top network. So before we move into the top network, I'm just going to adjust the length just here. So attribute adjust vector. I'm gonna change this to length only and set it to multiply and a value of 5. So I'm just adjusting the length of the vector of the velocity, so it creates more directionality. So that is fine. Now let's do a .NET, and this will be our fluid simulation. So we will need a flip solver, we will need a flip object, we will need some gravity, and we also need a ground plane. So let's hook this up. So this goes in here, this in here. We can create a merge. invert it and disable the visibility and change this to mutual. And we can put the gravity in here. So that is fine. Let me see if I missed something. So that is fine. Now we will select these, and as the initial data we will use the first input. So let's just set this to particle field and remove this, and we will use instead the first input. So op input path, and we will use the first input. So this should do it. Let's make sure on the guides we set this to particles. That is fine. Now let's connect the particles separation. So in this case I'm gonna pick this value and paste it in here, and copy this and paste it in here instead, so we can always change. So let's change this to 0.02 for now, and let's continue from here. So I'm gonna set the right now we are seeing these bounds, so I just want to make sure I don't visualize the bounds. Is it in the flip solver? Volume motion, volume limits, yes. Not gonna worry to scale it down. Or maybe I will. Let me see. In this case we can actually scale it, so just to make sure we don't simulate anything outside. So let's set this to 5, 4, and 5, and change this to 1.5. So that is working. Let's remove it so we can focus, right? Yeah. And what else will change? We will go to the flip object and change, in this case, we want to introduce some viscosity, so I'm gonna set that to 15. I'm going to enable the timeline first, and in the flip solver, let's make sure we enable viscosity. So let's just have a look what we have right now. This is getting slow, so not so much, because we need to change a few things. So first of all, we will set the time scale to be quite smaller, so it simulates slower, but we don't need so many extra sub-steps. I'm gonna just set it to 2. Going to the gravity also, I'm gonna decrease it to just be -5. Let's see how that looks. So nothing too much. -5. And I'm also going to move this ground plane a bit down. So now something is happening, and we need to turn on receding. Let me first go step by step. So in the receding tab, we will set the oversampling to 20, so quite a bit to fill in those gaps. And on the volume tab, I'm also going to change this to epic, which is better for a smaller scale, at least I was told that. And also I want to enable surface tension and increase it quite a bit, so let's set it to 90. And let's see how that goes. So that oversampling is kicking in, and we are getting the desired result, which is this fluid splash type of thing. I believe I'm not forgetting anything, and I guess we can just increase the particle separation. So let's set it to 0.0085, so quite a bit. And let's simulate. Let me just make sure I increase in here the cache to force something, so 45 gigs I believe. And let's simulate. I'm gonna simulate and be right back. So I believe we have enough frames to play with in here. I'm gonna pick maybe this frame 32. Going out. set here the object mask to be just flip, and from here we can do this the proper way, but I'm just going to time shift the frame. So I'm gonna time shift here the frame 32 and particle fluid surface, and go back, and we can pick in here the particle separation and paste it in here. So that is fine, but we need to change actually we need to smooth it a little bit, so maybe 10, and maybe we can do this with a VDB. So let's change this to Gaussian. That's too much. Let's change this to 15 and make sure we don't create any adaptivity. Let's see if that helps, or we can just soften the normals. Will that help? Still we see some issues in there, so maybe we can overshoot it. So if we multiply this by 1.1, or 0.9, I mean 0.7, yeah, doesn't matter. Can just set it like this. It's not going to be that visible, so we don't need to worry too much about. So let's just do a file cache, and we can say splash demo and save to disk. So now let's have a look in here. We have this, and we have our splash, and I guess this is where we end this lesson, and in the next part we will create the water drops and do the rendering part. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, you can consider supporting me on Patreon, where you can find all the project files from my videos, including this one, and also a lot of tutorials, exclusive tutorials, and some courses also on the Patreon shop, so check that out. And let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one. Thank you!